I'd like to welcome you to the 11th Annual UCLA MedTech Partnering Conference. I'm Dina Lazovsky. I'm the Senior Director of Business Development at UCLA's Technology Development Group. And I wanted to tell you, I actually thought about having ChatGPT write my opening comments today, but I'm terrible at sticking to a script, and I really didn't want to annoy our new bot overlords. So, seriously for a moment though, because there's been so much chatter about AI and ChatGPT, I wanted to add my own 2 cents. These are tools, just like any other tools. We can use them wisely, we can use them horribly, but it's really up to us, the humans, to figure out how to use them the right way. So with that, I wanted to point out that we actually have 2 panels this afternoon about using digital tools to the best of our ability. One is our AI imaging playbook about using AI in medical imaging, and the other is about using the metaverse for patient care. So be sure to check those out if you're one of the people who are very concerned about these types of tools. So with that, thank you so much to all of our sponsors. Premium sponsor, Nixon Peabody. You'll hear from Harsh Parekh, partner at Nixon Peabody. He's moderating the Metaverse panel I just mentioned. Thank you so much to KPPB, who's sponsoring our demo track. They are also handing out that $10,000 check to the demo track winner. Thank you to our supporting sponsors, Bioscience LA and Riverside Law. Thank you so much to our Bruin sponsors. We could not do this without you. And speaking of not being able to do this without people, all of our community partners who've helped us make this into a true ecosystem regional event. Thank you so much. And one more set of points I wanted to make. This is the 3rd annual LA MedTech Week, and this was really the brainchild of Paul Grand, CEO of MedTech Innovator. He and I have been talking for years about pulling this together, and we made it happen with the help of Bioscience LA, Dave Whalen, who you'll hear from later today as well. Now this has turned to an amazing set of events. The first one was yesterday. They're going on throughout the week. Hopefully you'll be able to enjoy some of them as well. We're so proud of how far this has come. Also, the 11th MedTech Conference at UCLA acknowledges our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. So, let's get this party started. I want to welcome Kirsten Leute, partner from Osage University Partners, onto the stage. Kirsten, come on up.
Thanks so much, Dina. Dina and I have actually known each other for a very long time. We don't want to talk about how long. And I'm thrilled to be here at MedTech, UCLA, and just partnering in general with UCLA. We have a terrific partnership with them. I'm going to give, hopefully, a talk that'll help set some of the stage for today, talking about financing trends in 2021 and 2022 in the MedTech and medical devices space. This is actually part of a larger talk that our firm gives every year on financing trends in deep science areas, which is those are the areas that we invest in. So we're a venture capital firm that invests in startups associated with academic research institutions. We invest in all stages, all sectors of those, but we're really looking for anything that is deep science. So we partner with research organizations. About 100 or so are partnered with us right now. The research organizations we work with actually receive many benefits of working with us, one of which includes actually a portion of our profits. We are now investing out of our 4th fund, and between our 4 funds have over $800 million of assets under management and have invested in over 130 different companies. If you have any more questions about what it is that we do, feel free to find me at one of the breaks today. I'm happy to talk about that always. But the reason that we're here in particular is to talk about MedTech, and I'm going to talk about med devices in particular. Before we go into the data that I'm presenting, and FYI, I'm presenting data from 3 different sources. One is the Silicon Valley Bank Healthcare Investments and Exits Report from 2022. Another is a Deloitte MedTech report. And the third is actually from our own data. We have a very large database where we track a lot of startup companies, over 9,000 active startup companies that are a part of the partner institutions that we work with. And from that, we can derive a lot of data about what's going on with those startup companies. We hook that into PitchBook that also provides us a lot of the numbers that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so I was asked to talk really quickly about the difference between MedTech and med devices. I think actually probably most everyone who is here is aware of the differences. Medical devices in general is a subset of MedTech. MedTech kind of bring this broader area that also includes in vitro diagnostics, digital health, and then anything kind of products or services that is sold into the healthcare sector and maybe has a similar pathway to medical devices as far as regulatory and commercial. However, my now saying that, not everyone defines this the same way, which is one of the reasons that sometimes data is a little bit more difficult in this particular area. So just bear with me as we go through some of this, but also keep that in mind as you're looking at your own sources for data that people sometimes don't always have the same definitions for these particular areas. Here is my first slide. All right, so this particular slide is taken from that SVB healthcare report that I mentioned earlier. The graph in the upper left-hand corner here is showing the deal count in overall healthcare sector for the last 3 years, and it's divided out by quarters. So you can see by the gray line going across there about the deals that were done in 2020, 2021, and 2022. And as we all know, the markets had a terrific surge in 2021 that fell down, decreased quite a bit in 2022, although that first quarter of 2022 obviously was on par with much of 2021. But the markets, did what they did, and that was reflected by the number of deals associated with the healthcare sector. It was also, of course, associated then with the dollars that were being invested in those areas. And so these are the four main areas that SVB divides the healthcare world out into. So the green is the biopharma sector, the blue is the health tech sector, some of which MedTech falls under that. The magenta is diagnostic and tools. Again, some of the MedTech area also falls under that. And the red is the devices, which fits squarely into our MedTech. So I'm going to mainly focus on devices just because health tech and diagnostics and tools are different categories necessarily than just MedTech. But what's interesting about looking at this graph, or at least what I find of interest, maybe you'll pull out other things too if you look at this particular report, is the huge increase in dollars that went into the biopharma, again, the green bars, and health tech in 2021. Just really an amazing year for them. And if you, for example, look at Q4 of 2021, health tech actually eclipsed biopharma for that particular quarter as far as investments. But what we like to look at is, year over year growth for each of these sectors. And so that's actually over here on the right-hand side for each one of these particular sectors. And you can see that shift of 2021 to 2022 was an increase for all sectors, but obviously a huge increase for the health tech space. Whereas in 2021 to 2022, obviously everything decreased. But devices, if you look at that, the decrease was far less significant than for the other sectors. And in general, people have found this about the device area. It's a far more resilient area year over year as far as deals and funding and moving forward with them. And that's going to be shown even more in this next slide, where we're looking then specifically at medical device deals, where the deal count overall fell, but still is historically high compared to other years. So going across this particular slide from the left-hand side, looking at the graphs first, you can see in 2020, $6 billion were invested in this space with 336 deals done. In 2021, $9.2 billion. I believe that was a historical high for the medical device space with 549 deals done. And then in 2022, actually first half actually was a historical high overall for the medical device space. But it did, have that decrease along with the rest of the markets in the second half of 2022. But still, 500 deals done in 2022, $8.5 billion invested. So it was really not a significant drop overall for medical devices. And then what they've done is, again, this is from that SVB report that we're talking about, They've divided this out then by particular sectors within the medical device market. Non-invasive monitoring has been a huge sector for a long time in medical devices, and still has the throne of being the top area with $1.8 billion invested in 2022 and 84 deals done, so the highest both for dollars and deals. What's interesting is the previous year in 2021, imaging had that throne. With $1.2 billion invested, but only 59 deals done. So a lot of money going into the sector, though the number of deals was far short of non-invasive monitoring. The dollars going into that area, though, decreased significantly, obviously in 2022, although the deals didn't decrease significantly. The one other place that I'm going to mention on this particular side as far as indications is the drug delivery area, just because that did have a significant increase also in dollars of funding. You'll note in 2020 that the dollars into drug delivery area were $231 million with 23 deals done. And if you look at last year and this year, in the 600 millions, almost 700 million last year in the particular area. But the deal numbers haven't increased that much. More dollars are going into these drug delivery deals. And so that's an area that obviously people are really putting their money into, believing that there's a lot happening in the promise of drug delivery as well. I won't go into the other particular areas on here, but I am going to move now to the right-hand part of the screen to talk about valuation and how valuation is working, particularly for these seed and Series A deals for startup companies. And you can see that valuation for medical device companies overall is increasing. The pre-money valuation is increasing over the years, but the deal size itself has remained fairly steady. So for 2020, pre-money valuation of the company was $8 million, $5 million deal size, median deal size, so post-money valuation typically being at $13 million, all the way up to 2022, where that pre-money valuation now has jumped to $15 million. So everyone's saying, hey, company, you have created more value. Your pre-money valuation we're going to have is a lot higher, but the deal size hasn't changed that much. So the median deal size being $4 million going into these companies. And then they note down here the largest deals in the seed and Series A's rounds that were done back in 2022. And what we have done then is we've taken this same information for medical devices from the Silicon Valley Bank healthcare report and done that for universities. This is now taken from our own database, and because we work so heavily with academic institutions, we like to, contrast and compare. See, does the overall healthcare report actually compare with university deals? And so you can see here on the left-hand side, this is a graph that is similar to that first page of graphs that I showed you. With the deal count being across the top and the dollars invested in these deals from academic institutions being the bar graphs themselves. The one note I will say about the deal count is that you can see, again, historical high in 2021 with 252 deals in the medical device space as we have categorized it, and it goes down to 157 in 2022. My suspicion on this is that it actually is not that low, and this is just an artifact of when we receive data from the institutions, and that it probably is more on the level of around a 2020 deal count, around 190 to 200 deals out of academic institutions. Which, if that is the case, the dollars is probably also lagging, in which case the dollars may be actually comparable to 2021. But still, even with the lower deal count, the dollars are higher than 2020 and 2019, more dollars going into fewer deals. That's one of the themes I think that we're really seeing here in the medical device space, and I think it translates over into the overall MedTech space as well. Sometimes indicating that basically people are putting more dollars into the deals that they already have dollars in those later stage rounds, but overall they want to build up the particular companies that they think are most promising in this space. The other point I was going to make on this left-hand side is just overall, the average deal size is growing in the last 10 years, which you can see very well by this graph with the dollars increasing over time. Now the right-hand side of this slide, this is a comparison to that previous slide on those median seed and early stage valuations for companies out of academic institutions. So in 2020, the median pre-money valuation was $10 million with median deal size of $2 million. For 2021, it actually went down slightly for the pre-money valuation of $9 million, but deal size $3 million, so not really much of a difference there. You can kind of fudge that, I think, here or there. But in 2022, the pre-money valuation median went up to $12 million. So to me, this reflects what we saw on the last slide. Again, pre-money valuation in general for these seed and series early stage deals is typically getting higher. But the deal size is staying the same. Now, what is making this higher? I think we could have I'm sure our panel that's coming up next can discuss a little bit about the pre-money valuation. But we know that there's a lot more programming happening at universities and otherwise to increase the value and the likelihood that these technologies are going to be able to make it commercially in the spaces that they're in. All right, so last point on this particular slide is that these are the largest seed and early stage deals that we found in our database from last year, and they're from all over the US. Emory, UCSF, Harvard, and Michigan are some of the ones that I can remember that are on this particular slide. This particular slide I'm not going to spend too much time on, but Silicon Valley Bank likes to compare valuation step-ups between rounds, and what that means for the companies is how much value is being created for the company between the different rounds as they go along. And just what's interesting about this, and we don't have a comparison on this particular side, is that the step-ups in the MedTech area, the medical device area, tend to be not as large as other areas, but tend to be more resilient and consistent over time. Just to help you understand this slide, the dotted lines are that median step-up. The median step-up being about 1.7x for both the seed to Series A, and then the same for the A to B step-up as well. Now that step-up is lower for the later stage deal, so not as large of a step-up in valuation happening in the med device space for the later rounds. Now, that's the median. There are, of course, exceptions to this, and if you take the time to read over the report, you can find out about those companies that are actually having a greater than 5x step up in the area as well. All right, so who's actually investing in these particular areas? Well, the panel, I think that's coming up next, will be able to talk about that. It's obviously many of the people who are in this room, but SVB does have who they tracked and thought were the most active investors in these particular areas. And you can see from overall venture activity, both Shanghai Capital as well as Alumni Venture Groups are the most active investors, but followed closely behind by Angels and some other folks as well. But Alumni Ventures Group is a very interesting investor in the area, having these alumni-associated venture activities associated with certain academic institutions. If you go over to the late stage and crossover activity, BlackRock is the #1 investor across the last 2 years. However, they do fortunately divide these numbers into 2022 and 2021 numbers. So BlackRock was obviously quite high on the list back in 2021, but only did one deal in 2022, whereas RA Cap, I think they're like the only one on this page that actually besides Intuitive Ventures, who did more deals in 2022 than 2021. And you can keep going across the way. You can see who the corporate venture active investors are, with GV and Intuitive being in there. But also here's where you start seeing some of the academic institutions or hospitals themselves who are active investors in the medical device area too. And then they do, one of the things about the report is they start looking into certain areas. So depending on the area that you're in, you can also see who are the most active investors in your particular area that you're having a startup or being entrepreneurial in. We love this particular slide. They actually didn't this is actually from 2021. They didn't do this particular slide for 2022, but this is U.S. device investment by region. And as you can see from this slide, the West is the way to go. So terrific for the Western region, with in 2021 had the highest number of deals with 137 deals. But what's interesting again about this is that in 2021, highest number of deals, but the dollars invested, I don't know if you guys can see that, the dollars invested in the Western region deals was $3 billion. And if you look at that comparison to the next highest region, which is the Northeast, 107 deals done in 2021, but only $1.5 billion invested in the Eastern region. So it's not just the number of deals, but the dollars invested in the Western region in medical devices is huge. And then in the upper right part of this, you can see the main cities that are being invested in, with the Bay Area being the top, not really a city, obviously, much more a region, but San Diego, Seattle, and Los Angeles being in the top 6 as well. And this is taken from that Deloitte report that I mentioned to you. It's called New Strategies for MedTech Startups. It's actually a much more full report that I'm providing here. But, and I think actually this is a great area. I hope that the panel that's coming up will be talking about this, but just investment challenges in the MedTech space. Obviously, for all spaces right now, exits are a huge challenge. Why are exits such a challenge? Because investors want to see exits happen. In order for them to be able to provide returns to their limited partners, they need to have those exits happen so that they can go out and raise their next fund and keep themselves employed in what they're doing. So they are looking for exits to happen within a certain time frame. Everyone knows things ebb and flow. But with the closing, basically, of the public markets in the second half of last year, that made everyone pull back a bit, right? And that's why they ended up investing so much in perhaps their current companies than perhaps the new companies that are seeking capital. There are indications that people are thinking that the IPO market may open up a bit more, that maybe M&As will be more open this year as well, but I think that's still to be seen. Other areas of investment challenges, it continues to be the approvals and how payments and reimbursements are going to happen, the adoption in MedTech in general of the particular devices and tools that are being generated, how that happens, and then who's going to pay for it. Other investment challenges in MedTech, strategics tend to be more conservative with their investments in the MedTech area than in, for example, the pharmaceutical area. And so they're looking more for these clinically proven products and that have proven payment pathways and sales channels so that they know that when the device is put out, that someone will be paying for it, and therefore the patients will get access to it. Another investment challenge is just the number of investors who are investing in the area. It's just lower than some of the areas such as pharma, et cetera. But we have seen a lot more crossover activity happening in the MedTech area. Some investors who were traditionally more in other spaces have become more interested in the MedTech area, and I think all of you probably know that in the last few years, considering the advances and how that crossover is happening from engineering and perhaps more traditional therapeutic disciplines. I think this one is really a question for the panel as well, but just I'm going to seed it before that. What investors in particular are looking for in MedTech? Scalable technologies that address unmet needs in large markets. I mean, there's 3 main things there: scalable, unmet needs, large markets. Seems obvious, of course, but at the same time, when you can say, here's how this technology is scalable, here's why this is an unmet need that hasn't been addressed yet, but I'm going to be able to do that, and here's how it can become a large market for you. Another thing that people are looking for is companies that can reduce the overall cost of healthcare, really looking for efficiencies in healthcare. We've all heard of the horror stories of how much things can cost in the healthcare market and what can be done about that, whether it is these digital tools that can help people actually do things at home rather than in a hospital or otherwise. And then, of course, I mean, I don't have to say even this one, capital efficient. Fortunately, the days of buying foosball tables in general for startups are over. Never was really a thing, I think, in the MedTech market. People were much more interested about the innovations that were actually going to help people rather than kind of the perhaps silly startup perks that other people had had. I'm just going to mention really quickly, and I'm not going to go into it because I am out of time. We do invest in MedTech and medical devices in particular. Because we invest in deep science, it's just a small portion of what we invest in. These are a couple of the companies that we've invested in the past. And I'm going to wrap up there and lead us, I think, right into the panel discussion on MedTech. So thanks so much for having me.